to another episode of Analytics Mindset. This episode is going to be focused on understanding CTEs and subqueries with BigQuery. And you might be asking yourself, why BigQuery? Well, this video was supposed to be done with SQL Server. That was my original intention. But there were some issues installing it. I don't really have a license anymore now that I'm not a student. And between other things, BigQuery is in the cloud. It is far more future-proof than SQL Server, at least in my opinion. You have a distributed system in the cloud. And yes, it's not precisely fully a relational database in the very traditional sense of the word, but it works and it is very popular, getting way bigger than that and easy to set up. You can see again, I did put some instructions how to get BigQuery to give you a free environment. As you can see now, I have one here. Yes, I do have one to my employer on SQL Server, but I cannot show it yet, and I'd rather not. Those are the reasons why this video was supposed to be with SQL Server, if you see my plan, but you're just going to go with BigQuery, because, again, easier, more future-proof, etc. We will start with this BigQuery public data. That is another advantage of BigQuery. It has public datasets, meaning that if you create your project, and you look for this query, for this data, you will find it in your site. You can see it here, and as always, I will also provide you the SQL code so you can actually query it yourself. If I open this, you can see how I get from the BigQuery public data project in the non-intersectional representation. You get some stuff like the workforce, report year, race Asian, race Black, race Hispanic, race Native American. What does this all of this mean? This is Google's own report on their diversity measures. Now, to be clear, I'm just using the data because it's easy to access and to interpret. That is all. But if you want to see how it looks like, I will just do what I usually do when I don't know how data looks like. I just do a select star from this, and I will do a very simple limit 10. You can see that you have overall workforce, tech workforce. There is actually not that many records. I did limit 10 just for the speed purposes, but this data is very small in general. You have one per year, so that's a report year. 2014, when did this come to? 2015, etc. The race Asian in percentage, this will mean that overall of Google's workforce, 31.5% were Asian or 95, better said, because it's a voluntary sample, on the year 2014 for the whole workforce. And you have it for each of the races identified closer to the census, US Census Bureau, and then gender. US women, US men. In the US, 29% of the workforce was women, 71 was men, and then the global one, 30.6% were women. I was actually very surprised of that development. I can see why. It's just a percentage difference, but I really expected the US woman percentage to be a little bit higher than the global gender one. CTEs and subqueries come from basically the same concept. You are trying to do more complex manipulation and a lot more complex querying than you will be able to do usually with all the techniques that we already learned before. You can do use select, from, where, etc. Group by, order by, window functions. At some point, it becomes harder and harder to do some stuff. And by that, I mean you will run into limitations such as, oh, I can't join this data. Or instead of that, I can't filter on this because it is something I created now. So I have two options. I can duplicate it all over from scratch, or I can do a CTE instead. Let's start with the most basic of the two, the subquery. You might have looked at this. We have done one or two around sometimes, but you can see here how I have a query inside a query. That is the whole concept of a subquery. It is very straightforward. You create to some degree something in the inner query and then you pass it to the outer query. And it can get very complicated. You can create very long scripts of queries that refer to the queries that refer to the queries and have them inside. It is also very, if you work with other systems, all the, I mean, 80s, 90s systems, that's always a nice to know. I have faced myself. In some database systems, they might not support CTEs fully. And if that's the case, to do very complex manipulations, subqueries will be the only thing you will have. Subqueries are widely supported. It's just very old systems that don't support CTEs. Tableau Prep, for example, has some issues getting CTEs inside it, even the custom SQL when it connects to a database. Access doesn't have a lot of stuff that should have because it never implemented SQL fully, etc. You get my point. If you work with other systems, most likely than not, you are going to use subquery. CTEs are very similar, and we will go there into a second, but subqueries are the basic concept, and it's exactly the same concept, more or less. What are we doing here? I am taking the gender US men and dividing it by the gender global men, and I'm calling that as male index US global. Very straightforward, and the same for women. And then I'm filtering it for the tech words. From there, I'm ordering by the report year, that doesn't matter, it's for you to know. And after that, I'm reaggregating that in a query outside. I am selecting workforce, then counting the distinct number of years, report years that this report appears, and taking the average of those two indexes. This subquery, you could go around and do it without doing the subquerying if you wanted to. It will be very complicated. I am just using it mostly because I am renaming those columns and creating those two additional columns. You could, yes, replace this here, over here, and then you need to use the where, but your query will look a lot bigger than that. And there is out of cases. If you group by something and then create a case when at the same time, you most likely than not won't be able to do that. You will need to use subquery. If you want to pass a dynamic list of values saying, I got this list, I need to refresh every time I pass this, and then I need to pass it to another table, so you're not using exactly the same table, then you will need to use subquery. Notice here how the outer statement, the outer query here has a from. Then I got a parenthesis. This indentation is optional. I strongly encourage it because it helps organizing your code a lot, but it's quite very optional. And then you actually can name your table. So we can name it, for example, as data if you wanted to. Well, it's actually reserved. Let's call it the data. It's optional, but you can refer that table outside. So you could actually join this the data table outside, and you could join it to this and get a comparison with other non-tech workforce over that summary. And yes, again, you could probably, I don't know if you could actually do that without a CTE, without a subquery, because in that case, you are creating an aggregation for tech and non-tech, then joining the two of them. If you want that exercise, that's something for you to figure out later. Happy learning, but I might do it myself eventually. But you are creating two different aggregations and then joining them on the actual Number of years probably that will be unless there is one missing there, or you can just append it because you could just have appending will be the best. Then you can compare the tech workforce with the tech non-workforce in the summaries. My point is, a lot of this stuff that you will do in Excel, you will do in Tableau, etc. You can do it in CTE, in subqueries here. They are a very powerful tool in the apparently more advanced realm. I don't really consider, well, to be fair, I also query at least 20 queries per day or my day job every day. But once you understand the concept, you can do very, very powerful manipulations with subqueries. Now, their counterpart, CTEs. What is a CTE's purpose? You can see here, and if you compare the two numbers, it's exactly the same. It is exactly the same result. It is not exactly the same number. CTEs are a more formal approach built on top that has a different syntax, but it really does exactly the same thing. It just allows you to organize things better. You can do whatever you do in a subquery in a CTE. Fun enough, like some obscure text will say a lot of stuff in SQL. After all, is just a join. You can think as a work clause as you are creating a table and then you are doing an inner join with the main table looking for those elements, for those specific elements in your work clause. There is a lot of database understanding behind it that I do not want to explain in this video because I want to keep it short. But the main concept here is it is very similar. It came by CTEs, and that stands for Common Table Expression. That's a very, very common interview question. More in the career side of things. What you want to know is that CTEs allow you to do stuff more organized. Now, if you go into the more data engineering / query optimization side of things, the other advantage of both CTEs and subqueries is that you can pre-filter your data and then do all these aggregations on the filtered data. Here I'm creating this table first called the data, so that's what happens first, and then I do all these other transformations here. Same here, I start with start data, I'm declaring that table as this, and then I'm creating this whole table here. Then I select these things from workforce, number of years, the indexes from star data. Why? Why is it important for me to do that? This data is pretty small. If we go to the actual data again here, and I'm just going to get the actual table itself. And you can go in details to see the actual schema here and a lot of other stuff from Google. You can see it only has 36 rows. It's 3.14 gigabytes. That is kilobytes. That's not big at all. Querying this data, the job information you can see here. Like, I have a very, very free, basically, project from Google. I am in the lowest priority ever, and I have the lowest resources BigQuery can offer me. Even then, it took 27 milliseconds. My point here is in this, with this table, we don't need that resource optimization. Yes, it's gonna exclude what? There is only 9 years, so I'm excluding the other 27, and I'm just getting 9 of them. But when you're querying millions of rows, hundreds of millions of rows. That is pretty easy to do because BigQuery is, again, is not really a traditional data based management system. It's more like a data lake or data warehouse. It works more on Parquet or Delta files or whichever file extension that your employer decides to use. But the power of these two tools, and that doesn't just apply to BigQuery, it also applies to Oracle or if you use Informix, I hope you don't, but if you use Informix or other of the older database systems, all of them, you benefit a lot from filtering your data in both rows and columns. You make it smaller, and then you pass that to whatever transformation you have. It acts as a very powerful filter because if you were doing all of this in one step, that again you could do in this query, not if you were doing more complicated stuff. You pass all the non-tech workflows there too. And yes, again, this is a silly example because it's only 9 versus the rest of the rows of the table. But if you had hundreds of thousands, millions, dozens of millions of records, you will for sure be very grateful that your averages are run in just the data that you want, in not, and not on every single thing. And yes, SQL has some stuff to go around in where, having, etc. But because of the organized execution, sometimes things can just get away and just filter out through. CTEs and subqueries not only allow you to do more complex stuff, way more complex manipulations that you can do with regular querying, but they also allow you to create tables with your own data and then create derived fields, then use those derived fields, and finally organize that in a code that you can actually understand. And yes, comments exist. You can comment out your code as much as you want, but a lot of it is also going to be making it understandable. And this is a lot more understandable. Subqueries and CTEs are pretty much the same on function at least. It's more which one you prefer. Usually CTEs go more to the realm of more advanced stuff because they are with the width and all, but you have seen it. It's not that difficult to crack. With that, I will finish that video here. I hope you learned something. Again, this is part of the more advanced stuff on querying, and I probably will stick with BigQuery for a while. It is a very powerful platform. I can show to you my free project. I already have it. And as always, the code is going to be in the description. I will have some resources there. If you have any questions, feel free to answer them, to ask them. And yeah, as always, I will appreciate any support. Thank you. Bye bye.